Good evening and welcome to Mets 360 here on Riverside. I'm your host, Brian Jura, and I'm very pleased to welcome to the show guy who runs his own website, and that's Mets News and Links, and you know him as John from Albany. John, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, well, let's get right into it. Let's talk about your site, Mets News and Links. Just a wealth of information is available at your site, and I want to know, what type of fan are you trying to reach?
Oh, I wish I knew. So it's sort of under construction, sort of in progress. My original design sort of got changed because of a couple things. Mostly I just wanted it one place for people, because there's so much great content out there, and I don't want to have to go. And it'd be nice if you had one spot that had it all. I mean, Sports Spider, which is another site, does a great job, and they help us out with different feeds and stuff on our site. But there were certain things and just a certain layout that I was looking for a little different. And so one of the things that I had on there was the Twitter list, so that when things were posted on Twitter, when like the Mets would post something or one of the beat writers would post something, it would show up automatically on our site. And then once Elon Musk bought it, he did away with that. He's made it very tough for sites to do that, to use those anymore. Maybe one day I'll bring that back, but it was great to have that instantaneous information, so that you could just go to our site and then you could see all the links to all the different websites. So as it got posted on different sites, you would see it. The other thing that happens is that more and more sites are going away from RSS feeds. More and more big news sites like the Post and New York Times and Daily News, they don't have those RSS feeds anymore. That's why Sports Spider was good, because Sports Spider was bringing them in, and so I had them on there. But I still like to see, like the MLB Trade Rumor still has an RSS feed. So instead of having to go to MLB Trade Rumors, you just go to my site and you can see what's happening with MLB, the latest MLB Trade Rumors. And AP Baseball does a really good one, so I have the AP Baseball feed on there too. The only problem, it only shows the top 15, the latest 15 links for AP, and AP flashes a lot. They do a lot, so they change over a lot. So like right in the morning when you get up and you look at it, unfortunately, it'll have previews of today's games, not the recaps of the last night's games, because once they post the previews around 7 a.m. in the morning, because it only does 15 at a time, you can't see the reviews from last night. But it's all a work in progress. And the other thing I did was, which when I started it, which I wanted it to be, because so many times I'm at a minor league game and somebody comes up, you say, who the heck is this? Now you could go to milb.com and click on it, and it just seemed like you couldn't get all the information you wanted on the minor league players. I used to have it, so I used to do a page on every minor league player, but the big component of it was that Baseball Reference used to let you embed live stats on your site. It was through a widget, and you could, so if you, for instance, have a Jet Williams page, and you wanted to see what the stats are, it would give you the stats as of today, because they load overnight, so it wasn't live, but it was pretty close to live. You'd see their up to date stats very easily. Now, if I want to do that, I have to go and manually update it every day, which is too much work. So that was, so I'm always trying to figure out a different way to do that. But that was my original idea, because you could just have all that information. I'm hoping to get back to that maybe over the winter, and then next year do it, but do it a different way somehow. Just that. I'm just trying to have one place where you can get all the information, and I use it. I use the site if I like the site and it makes sense to me, and I figure it might make sense to other people. So that's why I do it.
Yeah, I take a little bit of that same approach, and when I'm writing an article, I always say, well, if it's interesting to me, it'll be interesting to somebody else. So you just got to find the right people. But you mentioned recaps, and one of my favorite things that you do is you take a paragraph or two from several different sources of recaps and essentially create your own recap. And to me, that's always been something that I've really appreciated. How did you come up with the idea to do that?
It just sort of happened. So during COVID, when I was writing for Mac, I was doing it, and there was only one game in town, one Mets, because you didn't have all the minor league games. And
right.
So back from when I was a kid, the first thing I would do every morning, or sometime during the day, if I was going to school, after school, I'd go to the corner convenience store at the end of the day, and I'd go and get all the papers, and I'd sit and read them. And then once everything went online, back around late 90s or so, I would get up in the morning and I'd read all the papers. And sometimes, I print them all and then print all the articles and then read them while I'm eating breakfast or whatever. But and I've been doing that, since all the papers went online. So I just sort of summarize each one and not just doing a link to each one, but just give it like one sentence from each article. And then that's because a lot of them will say the same thing. Last night, Lindor and Soto hit back-to-back homers. Well, if you say it from one article, you don't need to say it from the other. So I just use a different fact from each one. One I might, like today, I said Kodai Senga came back, pitched 4 innings. Then his pitch count was kind of high, so they had him on a limit, and then they took him out. And then another one would say how Mark Vientos got that clutch hit with the bases loaded. So so piece together. So and then the other thing is I always, even though people say it's out, I guess Baseball Almanac does, some other places do it, but there's not one place where you can see, well, I want to see every game that was played on this date. So once you have today's recap done, then you can then post it in for next year when people go back and look at what games were played on July 12th, over the years. And, so I'm trying to get all those done. So I do like 6 years at a time. So I do 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And then, so hopefully at one point I'll have all, was it like 10,000 games they've played, something like that. So
Nice. Now, the way that I look at it is, I knew this visual artist, and he would take, I don't know, 500 pictures of some kind of landscape, and then he would assemble each of those things and make his own thing of the landscape. But because he did it from so many different sources, it got almost like a 3D representation. And I kind of feel like what you're doing gives the recap a 3D, because like I know when I'm writing a recap, my goal is to get it out in 10 minutes. So I'm hitting the highlights. I'm not doing a whole lot in depth. But when you add whatever thing I did to 5 or 6 other ones, all of a sudden there's that depth there that you can't get elsewhere.
Well, your first paragraph is the best recap in the business.
Nobody. You're very kind.
No, your first paragraph is like perfect every time. I feel guilty using it because I say, well, I could just use Brian's first paragraph. I mean, yeah, but because it is, you basically summarize everything in 2 sentences. Mets bullpen blew it again. Mets couldn't hit with running and scoring position. I mean, which probably you could say for like about
cut and paste.
Yeah,
but
there was one you did 2 years ago. I want to say 2 years ago, or if it was maybe a year ago. But I think it was last year. It was a 7-0 game against Washington, and it was one that I just went back to on my games played on this date article I do each day. And your first paragraph was again what I used, because it said Mets gave up 11 hits. Unfortunately, the Nationals went 1 for 12 with runners in scoring position, and that hit didn't score a run. Hence, they won.
All right. Well, another thing that's available on your site are the daily transactions, and it certainly feels like the Mets have made 100 transactions in the past 2 weeks. So I got a 2-part question for you. And the first one is, how do you keep up with all of them? And the second part is there any transaction here recently that they've made that made you either particularly happy or particularly sad?
Well, the biggest thing that they did recently was that, and I put this on your site, I commented this on one of your game recaps, is they got rid of Zach Pop, and they brought up Alex Carrillo. Alex Carrillo is so, people say trust Stearns or don't trust Stearns, they like him or don't like him. One thing that Stearns has done a good job with, he has gone out and found a lot of pitchers in independent ball. Well, his scouts are. So at least he's hiring these scouts to go and really comb the bushes, I guess you could say, right? But this Alex Carrillo, he was from Venezuela. They saw him in the Mexican League in winter ball, throws 100 miles an hour and has an 85-mile-per-hour changeup. So that velocity difference makes him very formidable. Now, he's had sort of mediocre numbers in Double-A, good numbers, not great numbers. And then they brought him up to Triple-A where he was just lights out. And so they brought him up. He's given up a run in each of his first 2 outings, but he's got tremendous stuff. And that's a guy who I'm happy that they're investing in and giving him the chance, as opposed to these guys that get DFA'd by numerous teams and they're just picking him up. I mean, Zach Pop in his defense, he's been hurt most of the year, which is why the Blue Jays finally gave up on him. But he's not. It's still, there's a reason why he's been going from team to team. People think, oh, we can get this guy who was a good reliever a couple of years ago. He's not ready to, unless he was willing to accept a AAA assignment, which he's not. He cleared waivers. Nobody picked him up, but he declared himself a free agent. Unless he decides to come back, he'll hope to hook on with another team. But he's not major league ready right now. Maybe he can get back to it by the end of the year. But they've been picking up those guys. But I'd much rather go with the younger players. Is what I'm trying to say. These guys they've been finding an indie ball. And not that Alex Correa is that young. He's 28 years old, but same age as Zach Pop, by the way. Zach Pop is 28, and Zach Pop's got major league experience. But just the stuff that Alex Correa just has is just so much better. I guess he was an infielder and he converted. Him and also Anthony Nunez and this other Eduardo Herrera, 3 minor leaguers that they've had. I think Alex Correa converted. I know Anthony Nunez and Eduardo Herrera converted. No, maybe not. Maybe Alex Correa didn't.
I don't know what it was about Zach Pop. I mean, certainly we've seen a whole bunch of efforts from guys who come up, get shellacked, and then move on. But there was something about watching Zach Pop get lit up that just, it killed me. I don't know why it was. There was no rational reason for why it resonated so poorly with me, but it did. I did a silent little jig when he got DFA'd.
Yeah, but I mean, they've been picking up these guys like crazy, like Genesis Cabrera. They had him in spring training, and then he started with Syracuse, and then eventually got DFA'd. And Kevin Herget, of course, Richard Lovelady, who's still on the team. There's a guy who's at AAA now, Merriweather. He was up for a minute now. Oh, I guess they signed him just as he's just been at AAA. He hasn't broken through. I mean, they've had 36 different pitchers, if you count Jared Young, 35 regular pitchers on their roster this year. It's got to be a record. I mean, to go through all the different years to see what the most they've ever had on a team.
I believe they had 35 last year, and I can't recall if that was counting the 2 position players who pitched or not. I think it was 35 pure pitchers. Next one, they'll leapfrog.
Well, so 1962, their worst team ever. They had 17 pitchers.
Yep.
So that shows you. But I mean, that's sort of David Stern's mentality. He likes to weed guys in and out. So, if a guy's not working, they get rid of him.
It's not limited to the Mets. That is much more standard operating procedure than either one of us would certainly care to see.
Yeah. Yeah, last year they had 37 pitchers, but that included Eddie Alvarez and Luis Torrens.
Yep, so it was 35.
Yep.
Well, John, you focus a lot on the minor leagues, so let's talk some about that. And the 2 people's names who I hear most often on my site are Nolan McLean and Brandon Sproat, and everyone wants to know when they're going to be in the majors. So do you think that those 2 are ready?
I think they're close. I mean, McLean started off really well, had a great first AAA start, but then sort of has been good, but not as good as his first start. His first start, I believe he went 7 scoreless innings and looked unhittable. But then since then he's sort of he's given up. He's done well, but he hasn't been lights out. I mean, Brandon Sproat, his last 3 games, last 18 innings, he hasn't allowed a run. But the last 18 innings he has thrown to Francisco Alvarez.
Right.
So that not everybody's putting that connection together, but that's got to mean something. So as much as people are down on Francisco Alvarez, and he's only hitting like 200 at AAA since he's got sent down there. He's got 6 homers for the year, but I think some of those came in rehab before he went down. I think he's got like 4 since he's been down, since he got sent down. But he knows how to get major league hitters out, and so I'm sure he's working with Sproat to change his approach. The biggest thing that Sproat wasn't doing when he got called up to AAA was throw his fastball up and in, and back to play, back the hitter away from the plate, and then get him out with other stuff. He had some trouble with his control, which has been better lately, but he's just whatever. It just seems like he's just going about his business a lot better since Francisco Alvarez was there. So, Hayden Sanger is a great catcher, a great defensive catcher, but for one reason or another, I guess just that connection between him and Alvarez has worked.
Well, great stuff on the up and in with Sproat. Certainly something that I wasn't aware of.
It's funny because listen. So I watch a lot of MILB TV, and I was watching the game, one of the first games of the season against Worcester, and so it's the Worcester announcers you get when it's in Worcester. You get the home team announcer, and they kept saying, "Why isn't he throwing his fastball up and in? He's got that 99-mile-an-hour fastball. He's got to be pushing people off the plate." This is their announcer saying that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, they say that. Why isn't anybody on the Syracuse Mets picking up on this and telling them that? But so whatever.
Well, I have to say that all of us have been frustrated with these guys who've done well in Double A, and then they come up and pitch in Triple A, and they don't get the results. I know that I have at least one commenter at the site who's like, we just need to get rid of all the coaches at Triple A and start over again.
I don't know the play hitting coach. I thought I was really impressed with, but I think they got a new one this year for some reason. I guess he went to another team, but it's been a struggle of pitching. But you got to remember, it's Major League Baseball. I don't know how they make the decisions, but it's a different ball, AAA and Major Leagues, right, than it is the rest of baseball. So you come up with a different ball. It's a different strike zone because they use the ABS challenge system, and the ABS is traditionally a little lower than the regular when the umps call it. So it misses a lot of the high strikes. So if you have somebody that throws a hard throwing pitcher like Tidwell or Hamill, all those guys, and Sproat, they're used to getting that high strike. They're not getting it at AAA. So it's an adjustment that they have to make.
Now, tell me about how the ABS is implemented in the International League, because I know there's some places where they do it on every pitch, and then there's other places where it's just a challenge.
Yeah,
like
it's just a challenge. It's just a challenge, and I believe it's a challenge down at. I think it's only a challenge now at in Florida State League. So it's Florida State League and International League is the only two leagues that I know of that use it. Maybe maybe they're doing it in Pacific Coast League out west. But out of the leagues I watch, Florida State League and International League are the only ones that are using it. And I think it works. I think it works great. It's 3 challenges a game. If you don't like the call, it goes to the ABS up that the ump makes. They show a little diagram on the big screen, and you see the ball come in. And if it clicks the box, then it's a strike. Otherwise, it's a ball. And it gets rid of all the blatantly bad calls that you see in major league games all the time. Like the other day with Luis Torrens, that could have been challenged, and then they could have settled it, and nobody would have got kicked out because it would have been black and white up on the screen.
Yep. There were 2 calls to Torrens that certainly looked like they were balls. And the beauty of the ABS system is that only 3 people can do it. It's either the pitcher, the catcher, or the hitter, and you have to do it immediately. There's
Right.
none of the check-in
Nope.
replay or asking the guys in the dugout. It's those 3 people, and that's it. And what I saw in spring training, I'd say it was less than 10 seconds.
That's how it is in the minor leagues too. It's super quick. It's
all right.
So much quicker than any other replay system. And they're using now in the Florida State League using the check swing system, and that works just as well too.
Oh, that'll be a good thing. I'll be happy to see that as well. But I do have one question for you. You were talking about one of the challenges that they face in AAA is maybe they don't get the high strike call as often as they did earlier. But if they're only using a challenge system, shouldn't the umpires still be giving that same high strike, and then it's up to the batter, I guess, to challenge it?
In theory, yes, but the umps do balls and strikes knowing basically where the ABS is. So if it's something that they might have called a strike in Double A, but they know the ABS is gonna, they tend to go with what the ABS does.
So if those umpires are that good that they can adjust essentially in real time to what the ABS system is, let's get them in the majors. Because like you said, there's guys in the majors missing 8, 10, 12 calls every game.
Well, that's because those guys are grandfathered in. It's the way that I know they don't have a union anymore. The MLB is supposedly their union. They busted the union when they went on strike a few years ago, when Eric Gregg and all those guys went on strike. But they get, unless there's an opening, unless somebody leaves, they don't necessarily hire new people. But I guess they do reviews every year, right? Don't they do reviews at the end of the year, and then they I don't know what comes out of it, if people lose their job or they just tell them to try to get better. But
I remember when Sandy Alderson was in the major league office, and the umpires instituted their mass resignation. Alderson said, "This is either a threat to be ignored or an offer to be accepted," and it was like, "Yeah, go get him, Sandy."
mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we talked a bit about this a moment ago, but I'm going to press you for a name here, and that's this churn that we're going through, where we see a reliever called up and then he's DFA'd or optioned 2 days later. Is there anyone in the pipeline who you think may debut later this year, who maybe the average fan isn't aware of?
Yeah, two guys who they drafted last year who I think could make it. The biggest, when I saw that question, you told me you were going to ask me that. The biggest guy that I've been advocating to come up is now up, but that's Alex Carrillo. So I think that was a big benefit. Of course, the guy who I've been really most excited about, the relief pitcher I've been most excited about in the minor leagues for the Mets for the last 4 years or so, has been Paul Gervais, who throws 97. When he's on, he can pinpoint that 97 no matter where he wants it. He's basically unhittable. And of course, they traded him for the great Tyler Zuber, who they DFA'd.
Yes.
And that was a terrible trade. Gervais was coming off an injury, and he really had trouble with control last year for the first part of the year, but he was getting better. And so they decided to trade him. And now he's pitching in the major leagues for the Rays. But I was very upset about that. But one of the reasons I think they made that trade is because they drafted two guys last year who were both very impressive. One's a AAA and one's a AA. And AAA, it's the guy by the name of Dylan Ross. He hits 100. He had Tommy John surgery at one point. Supposedly he's back, and he has been very good. I don't have his AAA stats with me right now, but his stats are combined anyway. Looking at hitters. I'll do it. Did Luke Ritter pitch? No. I guess Luke Ritter threw an inning. So yeah, Dylan Ross. He's 2-0, 2.45 ERA. That's with Brooklyn, Binghamton, Syracuse. So he's got called up. 29 pitches. He's got 53 strikeouts. He's good. He's someone who could come up, but I think they don't want to bring him up unless he's going to stay up. And he's 24 years old. I'm pretty sure they drafted him last year and maybe the year before, but he's got 2 years to go before he's a Rule 5 guy. I think he's going to be up sooner rather than later. The other guy is at AA right now, Ryan Lambert. He was started again with Brooklyn. He's been moved to Binghamton. He could get moved up to Syracuse too soon. He's 2-1 with a 2.01 ERA in Binghamton. He's pitched 31 innings overall. He's got 50 strikeouts. He looks really good too. So they're both right-handed pitchers. Ryan Lambert's a little younger. He's 22. Dylan Ross is 24. There's other guys that have impressed in times. I mean, there was a guy at Brooklyn who unfortunately had to get Tommy John. Is just trying to work his way back. He's been in the organization for a while. I think he's even Rule 5 eligible. This guy Jace Beck. But last night he had a good outing. I think he struck out 4 in 2 innings. But he's sort of trying to get back to the groove. Before that, before he got hurt, he had, they say, pitched 30 innings and struck out 60. He was averaging 2 strikeouts an inning just about every time. And he was lights out, but then he got hurt. So he's trying to work his way back. But he's 25. He's been around for a while. But he's at Brooklyn now. Hopefully he can come back. But he had great stuff before he got hurt. He was something that really impressed me.
Now, you mentioned one of those guys getting a promotion, and let's talk about promotions for a second. It seems to me, and this is just an impression, I haven't done any actual firm research into it, but it seems like the Mets were a bit more aggressive with their promotions last year than they are this year. And I wonder if you could address that comment in general, and then specifically with Jonathan and Jet Williams, who both seem to be stuck at Double.
Yeah, I think with Jet, I think it was just trying to make sure he was healthy, because when he got, he hurt his wrist and he missed all that time, he really struggled last year. And he had 1 week in Syracuse where he did really well. And then he wasn't the Jet Williams that we've seen in the past in the Arizona Fall League. He was, sort of didn't put up really great numbers out there. So I could see them trying to be cautious with him because of that. As far as Jonah Tong, I think Jonah Tong's coming up to Syracuse right after the All-Star break. There's rumored that he was coming up before, but I think then he got picked on the futures team. So they wanted to, because he's not pitching for Binghamton this week, let him get through that. And then I think they'll call him up. They usually do a number of promotions right around the draft. So maybe they'll wait till they sign a few guys and start assigning guys at different levels. But I think you'll see some promotions. And Santucci and R.J. Gordon just got called up to Binghamton from Brooklyn. So they probably both will be, if they do well in Binghamton, you'll probably see them in Syracuse in September, maybe before.
It certainly made sense to me to start Williams in Double-A for all the reasons that you spoke of. But I'm looking at his Fangraphs page now, and he's got 324 plate appearances in Binghamton, and he's got a 162 WRC plus and a 402 WOBA. So it's like, how much more do you expect to see? I think he's proved he can hit a Double-A, and I think he belongs in Triple-A right now.
Yeah, I think so. I think he'll be up there soon. Depending on, I don't know what they see him long term as as a center fielder or as a second baseman, shortstop. Same thing with he sort of fits the same type of player as Acuna. Maybe he's got a little bit more pop than Acuna.
No, not maybe. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
We hear so much about Acuna having this power, but he never gets to it in games. And, I don't care if he hits lots of home runs in batting practice. If you don't do it in the game, you don't have it. And he doesn't have it.
Well, and you, I think it was you who brought it, who pointed out a while ago when we first got him that he got most of his power in the Texas League, which is the ball
pretty
kind of
good hitters league.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Right. What do you think of Ryan Clifford?
I think he's another guy who doesn't really need to be in Double-A anymore. I think we have to accept that it's going to be power and not a whole lot of just average hitting, but power's a good thing.
Well, and he walks a lot. I don't think he's walking quite at the clip this year as he did last year, but last year he was like one of the top players in all of minor league baseball as far as walks. It was pretty amazing.
Ralph Kiner made a pretty nice career out of walks and home runs, so I think it absolutely can be done.
Yeah, and that's something that if you know the strike zone, that's something that should translate as you go up the levels. That's not, so early this year he really got beat by fastballs on the outside part of the plate. He was striking out a lot. But then he sort of made an adjustment, and he's been going when he gets the ball on the outside part of the plate, he's been able to adjust his swing and go the opposite way with that pitch. So whereas he's been hitting a lot of home runs early on, just to the pull side, he's been hitting a bunch more doubles and home runs to the opposite side. So that was the most encouraging thing about Ryan Clifford so far that he's done. He's made that adjustment. Now that he's made that adjustment and he's consistently done it, I agree. I think it's time to get him up to Triple-A, and I think that's the next stage. But early on, I was kind of surprised he came back to Double-A, but he sort of, pitchers sort of knew he was such a great pull hitter that they were pitching him outside. And at first he was susceptible to that, but he's really made the adjustment since then. What about Kevin Parada? What do you think about him?
One thing that I constantly tell my readers is that catchers do not have linear growth patterns. It's not just that upward slope. It's really up and down, up and down. And what we've seen from Parada here recently, gives hope that maybe there's something there. I think that a lot of people were ready to completely write him off as a prospect, and I don't think that we can do that anymore.
Nope.
Let's talk about Carson Benj.
Okay.
He did get a promotion, and he's in Double-A, which is where I think that a first-round draft pick from a major college should be in Double-A, his first full season in the minors. So I'm glad to see Benj at what I feel is an appropriate level for him. What are your thoughts on him?
Hitting wise, he seems like a good hitter. Another lefty bat. I think we're going to find out a lot more about him in Binghamton than we were in Brooklyn, where it's very hard to hit home runs in Brooklyn for a lefty batter anyway. We'll see. I have not, unfortunately, been to a game or seen him play in the outfield, so I'd like to do that. And he's a top-notch talent, and we'll see how that goes.
He's been playing a fair amount in center field while he was in Brooklyn, and I think that most people said the same thing about him time that they said about Drew Gilbert, in that, he can play center field in a pinch, but probably better suited for a corner. If you gave me one wish that I chopped into two, I would say that I would wish that Benj could play center field in the majors and Williams could play second base.
Yeah, no, I do too. I mean, they have a lot of guys that are speed guys in their organization. They have AJ Ewing, who's been stealing a lot of bases at Brooklyn. They have Morabito and Jet Williams at AA. You have Gilbert at AAA. Gilbert hit a wall when he had the problems with the hamstring, and I was surprised when I was talking to the team this spring how he was still struggling with the hamstring. They were telling me. So he seems to be doing better now, but he had a long recovery from the hamstring problems of last year. I really was impressed with him when I saw him in 23 in Binghamton after they first got him. But he struggled at AAA and then he got hurt. And then when he came back, he still was struggling. He struggled in the early part of this year. Hopefully, he's past those injury concerns and he's able to be the player he was back in 23 at AA. But it's funny because he wasn't putting up good numbers with the Astros when they traded for him. When he came over, that's when he really started to do well. He's again they're all like the same build. They're guys that aren't tall and who are like they're solid physically, but they're not someone that you could say can project to. Okay, well they'll fill out more and they'll develop more power. They probably what you see is what you get: a moderate power and good speed. Gilbert is they say, oh, he plays with his head on fire, but he's a very smart ball player too. I saw him make a lot of very smart plays to pick up runs or to cut down runs on the bases when he's in the outfield. Hopefully they'll make it. I'm not clamoring for some people were clamoring for him to be called up instead of Jared Young recently, but I think he needs more time. I think once he comes up, I think you gotta play him. So that's the hard thing about having Beatty, Mauricio, Acuna, and Vientos, really four people for two positions plus a DH that you can't, one of them, at least one's going to have to sit every game unless you.
Well, that's an easy choice. It's Acuna because he can't hit.
Yeah, but he makes a lot of sense to be on the team if you want a guy who can come in and pinch run, if you want a guy who can come in and play good defense late in the game.
You don't worry about finding him playing time. He comes in the 8th or 9th inning, and that's
right.
That's his role.
If you've made the decision, that's always going to be, then that's fine. I don't know if they've made that decision yet.
Well, if they think he's more than that, and I don't think that would be an unreasonable position. But if they think that he's more than that, it's no different than Brett Beatty this time a year ago. He needs to be in AAA. He needs to be in AAA for more than 2 weeks, and he needs to hit in AAA. They sent Beatty down last year, and then before he got hurt, he got a little over 200 plate appearances, and he hit. Acuna hasn't hit in AAA. And this most recent stretch, he had an empty 300 average. He didn't walk. He didn't hit for power. The hits fell in for him, so he batted 300 something.
289. He was hitting 289 in 12 games.
All right, so the last one must have been an offer. But anyway, so they called him back up.
Yeah.
He didn't prove he could hit in AAA. They called him back up to fill the same role that he played for them previously, which was 26 man on the roster, coming at the end of the game.
Yeah. Well,
anyway,
they really needed that. I guess they needed that good defense late in the game.
Well, and the thing is that the way that I've phrased it is that the talk about Acuna's defense far, far exceeds the reality of Acuna's defense. Because if you look at any of the publicly available advanced defensive metrics, either from StatCast or from DRS, McNeil's better.
Interesting. I would not have thought that. I think McNeil gets to a lot of balls that most people don't, and he doesn't always. When he gets to a ball that's probably out of his range, he doesn't always make the play. So which people I think gets a bad rap.
Acuna looks like somebody who should be a good defensive player. And I think, we have already got the value of his last name giving him a boost far beyond what he should have. And then there's he's incredibly fast. He's the fastest guy on the team. And I think that because he's fast, people say, oh, he must be a good defensive player. And he's not a bad defensive player. He's just not, he's no Frank White.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on. One of my favorite parts, the crazy prediction segment. So I'll give you what I think is a crazy prediction, and then I'll ask you to comment on it. and then we'll flip roles, and then you'll give me what you think is a crazy prediction, and then I'll comment on it. All right, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. So coming into today, Pete Alonso has a 907 OPS. My crazy prediction is that he finishes with an OPS lower than what he posted in 2023. So my crazy prediction is that he finishes with an OPS lower than what he did in 2023, which was an 821 mark. So tell me, how crazy is that?
That's not crazy because he's been doing better than he has done before, and you think generally people return to their mean. So I don't think that's a crazy prediction. I think that's probably a safe prediction. I'm hoping that he continues to do what he's been doing all so far this year. That what we see is how he's going to be, but it's he's got an 859 OPS lifetime. That's probably where he's going to end up. So if he's at 907 now, then he's probably going to go down. That just only makes sense. Was it 2022? We had a really good year. He had 869. That was a good year. So 907. He had 941 was his first year. So maybe he could keep it up. I'm hoping.
All right. Well, you didn't think mine was crazy, so show me how it's done. Give me your crazy prediction.
Oh gosh, crazy prediction. Mets will make a really bad trade at the trade deadline and give away a prospect that is the next Pete Crow Armstrong.
Wow. Wow. So I have to say that is certainly bold, and I'm gonna crown that one as crazy as well. I think as conservative as David Stearns is in dealing top prospects, the idea that he's going to deal one and it's going to be a bad trade, that my friend is crazy. Well done.
He did it. He did it last year with Paul Gervais.
Well, yeah, I have a soft spot for Gervais because he started off his career at a Division III school here in where I am in North Carolina. So he's certainly done well for himself, but he was not one of the club's top prospects. Let's put it that way.
No, he wasn't. And what they thought they were getting in the draft, basically, you always deal from a position of strength. The problem, and I'm okay with that because they seem to have a lot of guys that they had drafted that were similar models. The problem is that they traded them for a guy who was basically the same type of pitcher but older and didn't have the success that he had at one point. So I don't know. The problem with the Mets, the reason why they Pete Crow Armstrong, I think, is because they had too many GMs in a short period of time. The GMs didn't know their farm system and didn't know who to trade, who not to trade. Everybody got on Brody Van Wagenen about trading Kalenic for Edwin Diaz and Robinson Cano. But it was a great trade because look at Edwin Diaz. Look what he has been over the past 7 years or so. Whereas
whenever you're evaluating a trade, you can't just look at the results. You have to also look at what was thought of the players at the time. Kelenic has been a bust at the major league level, and no one can argue that. But
right.
in 2019, when the trade was made, or late 2018, I guess, the value of Kelenic was so much higher than what they got for him. So if you're a person who only views trades by what happened, then yeah, that was a great trade. But if they had turned around and offered that package of Kelenic and I'm drawing a blank on the pitcher who is also included, a short guy, Justin Dunn. If you had offered Kelenic and Justin Dunn to 28 other teams, you would have gotten a better deal than they got, without a doubt.
Right.
All right. Well, you talked about Pete Crow Armstrong, and there was a fascinating tidbit by Andy Martino over at SNY, where during the 2023 season, when the Mets decided to sell off assets, and when they traded Verlander and Scherzer and Tommy Pham and David Robertson, among others, that they reached out to the Cubs and they offered Pete Alonso for Pete Crow Armstrong. I'm floored. I'm floored that they asked that. The Cubs said no, by the way.
Wow.
But I'm floored that they said that. So I want to know, A, had you heard that before? And B, how do you think the fan base would have reacted if the Cubs were willing to do it?
The Met fan base?
Yeah, how the Met fan base would have reacted. if the
Met fan
Cubs were,
base, I don't think would have been happy because
they would have lost their mind.
Pete Alonso is very popular. I
Yes.
mean, the only time I would have traded Pete Alonso would have been right after 2019. One, because players rarely hit when they hit 50 homers, they rarely hit 50 homers again. And number two, he was at
Yes.
the peak of his value, and everybody thought Dom Smith was a major league first baseman. Not
Yes.
only was he a better fielder, but they thought he'd hit 300 and he'd be a good everyday first baseman. Nobody thought that Dom Smith would end up being what he was now. In fact, I guess the Indians, everybody was surprised they didn't get Dom Smith in the Lindor trade, and I guess the Mets didn't make him available, but because you would think that would have been a natural fit. Yeah, I mean, if they had offered Pete Alonso for Mookie Betts straight up, because when Mookie Betts got dealt that winter, that would have been they would have Red Sox would have jumped at that deal, and then Pete Alonso would have been perfect in Fenway Park, and Mets would have had Mookie Betts. To me, that deal would have made sense because then you would have had Smith to play first base, and you got Mookie Betts on your team. So
Would have been nice.
yeah, but Mookie Betts is a classic example of why the draft is this weekend. And a lot of people are getting upset about they don't pick to the 38th pick. There are so many. Mookie Betts was a 5th-round draft pick. There are so many good players in the later rounds. You have to have good. If you have good scouts and you know the guys that'll be still around after the first few rounds. Yes, you get a lot of good players in the first couple rounds, but then you get a lot of busts in the first couple rounds too. Just about any teams if you look at the last few years draft picks and you look at just the first round draft, you see so many busts. Um, but if you have good scouts, that's when you end up getting the Mookie Bettses of the world. It was a 5th-round draft pick, so hopefully they'll do that. Hopefully they'll get a few good ones. And in the last few years, they've been able to pluck some pitchers that look pretty promising, even though they didn't have a high draft pick. Last year with Lambert and Ross and Santucci and Sproat the year before that. Hopefully they'll find some gems this year, and that's where David Stearns will earn his money by finding guys. But you said just right, he is very conservative. He hasn't traded Mauricio, he hasn't traded Beatty, he hasn't traded. He I don't know if he'll trade Acuna. Maybe he'll trade Acuna. That's one of the rumors that he'll get dealt this time, but maybe not. Maybe they just see him as too much of a valuable guy coming off the bench late in the game for defense and for speed.
Well, let's wrap this up. My final question for you is: tell me, what are your overall thoughts on the current major league roster for the Mets?
I mean, I think they need a center fielder. I like Tyrone Taylor a lot. If everybody was hitting, you could have him play every day. Unfortunately, he's not consistent enough with the bat. But I like him as a player. I don't know if I'd go crazy, and I don't think there's going to be one guy out there that's a difference maker that they're going to be able to get. I mean, they're not getting a Yoenis Cespedes. I don't think so. It was probably the greatest trade acquisition they ever got. That was back in 2015 when they traded him. They were a different team, and he was caught fire. I don't think there's a guy out there like that that's going to be available. So, I mean, is there a pitcher that's out there that's starting pitcher? Yeah, maybe, and it would probably cost a lot. I mean, if they have so many middle infielders as prospects or as now on the major league roster, if they're going to trade a couple of those to get back somebody that's really good, that would be great. But I don't. Outside of someone that's a rental, I can't see them getting somebody that's going to be on the team for like 3 years or so. That's a good starting pitcher. I think they're going to they're going to get the Paul Blackburns of the world, and maybe they. I mean, Huascar Brazaban has been great. What a great pickup! They just traded a guy at St. Lucie for him. That was not a big prospect. If they could get a guy like that, that would be fantastic. But more likely they'll probably get a Paul Blackburn, a guy that gets hurt, doesn't do much. Cade Morris, who they traded for him, hasn't been doing much for the A's, or he didn't last year, but he did well for the Mets at Brooklyn. Then they traded him for Paul Blackburn, who hasn't been able to do much. Hopefully, he'll get his health together. He'll be serviceable. I don't see the Mets doing much roster wise. I don't see somebody out there that they can get.
Well, I'd like to thank John from Albany for joining us today. If you have never been to his site, A, shame on you. And B, visit it right now. And it's Mets News and Links. And I know there's both a blog spot and a Substack address for it. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it's the easiest way to remember is MetsNewsLinks.com. Its blog spot is a little longer. But if you just go to you Google Mets News and Links, usually get my Twitter page is what comes up, and then you can on my Twitter page has everything. It links to all the other sites. You can get a Substack, which every day I try to give you the recap every day, and which has the highlights and stuff of both the Major League and minor league games, so that you can subscribe to that, and it's free. So it's what I would like in the morning. If someone just sent me, here's the highlights, here's what happened, here's the box score, really, down and dirty, and, links to some of the different articles that are out there. So
Again, it's a great site. It's got a ton of information there. You go to that site and then you'll just end up poking around for it for a good hour and barely have scratched the surface. John, thanks for being a guest here today, and B, also for being a supporter of my site. It means a lot to me.
You do good stuff. It's a great site. So there were two guys who are better than all the newspapers out there who have the best recaps. It was you and Metstradamus. And Metstradamus doesn't do Metstradamus type recaps anymore. So now it's just you. So it's a lot of pressure. So I need you to keep doing what you're doing.
I will do it as long as my spirit holds out, as long as we keep the Zach Pops to a minimum.
Okay, I'll call David Stearns, tell him no more Zach Pops.
Thanks for the laugh, John, and thanks for doing this. And to the listeners out there, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.